my roots, and they actually go way back before I was born. My grandmother Wicks was organist at a little country church out near Wabash, near Dresden, near Chatham. You can picture all that. And I remember her as a young girl. Well, I was a young girl. She was older. And she would play by ear. Maybe you recognize it. Anybody know that? So we would dance around the room as kids. I know we're already doing some of the things they're advising young mothers to do with their children. Get them feeling the beat, the rhythm. And Grandma would make up the chords. She just knew that, okay, this was a chord on 1, and it changed to a chord on 5. Her ear told her that. So when Dad was born, Glenn Wicks, I think he inherited some of that, and thank goodness he passed on to myself and sisters. Dad was about 10 years old when he picked up a clarinet and started to teach himself. And next thing he had a saxophone apparently, and the fingering is the same for the saxophone, just a little different key. And so he started playing the saxophone. And when he went to Chatham for his high school education, he formed a little band. And this is what you might have heard when Dad was probably in about grade 10 or 11 with his little band. See if you recognize it. Kind of suits what you're doing today. 1924. Music goes, no, Nat. You can clap. I need some rhythm. Back there in the 20s and early 30s, decided that they were going to make their fortunes and head to the big city of Montreal. So off they went right after high school graduation, my dad and 3 or 4 others, and they hired an agent. And the agent finally started out getting them little jobs. The first one was they were advertising sardines. So they played, and they became known as Sardines of the Air. They played on the radio. And then the big opportunity came. A beautiful resort was being built between Ottawa and Montreal called the Seigneury Club, a private resort in those days. Most of you will have heard of the Chateau Montebello, or maybe have visited. That is the original Seigneury Club. It was built, a log construction, built like a wheel with the hub in the middle and the spokes going off into various sections of the hotel. Anyway, the agent called and said, come out to Montebello and get yourself an audition. And they did, and they got the gig. And it was a wonderful gig because they played at lunch, they played at supper, and they played for the dances. And the rest of the time, and this is in the Depression, the rest of the time they were able to ski, play tennis, have a nice time with all the debutantes that arrived. And debutantes did arrive. The Vanderbilts, Dad talks about the Vanderbilts. He met some famous people, like, here's one that, Jamie, you can tell me who wrote this one. I'll just play it for you. Sounds like this. Yeah, when did we begin to begin? Who wrote it? Anybody know? Yeah?
Cole Porter.
Right, thanks, Wendy. Cole Porter. So the band was playing away one day, and Cole Porter was in the audience, and he came up to Dad and said, "Have you guys ever heard of Begin the Begee?" No. I mean, this is Cole Porter's Begin the Begee didn't really become famous until about 1934, so it was just starting to make a name for itself. It was actually written, Cole Porter was on a long voyage around the world, and he was in Indonesia, that he heard this music played by the natives there. So he had taken it, put it to music. So he said to the band, "Do you think if I give you the music, you can do an arrangement of this?" And so this is what they came up with. Well, this isn't quite a band arrangement, but they played it for you. My ability to play it to help me along, but thank you for that. Another person Dad met was Rachmaninoff, and he was sitting in the audience one day, and the band played this tune, band arrangement. They said, "You know, that's not bad. I have never heard of it's a piano piece that he wrote. I've never heard that arrangement of the Rachmaninoff piano C-sharp minor." So the band played on. One day, I guess it would be about 1936, Dad got an urgent message from Dresden, Ontario, where his father operated a grocery store, and said, "Get home. I need you. Sugar has been rationed, and you're my only son, and you're out there wasting away your time as a musician." So Dad had to come home in 1936 and leave that wonderful gig at the Scenery Club, where, as I say, they had great fun skiing and meeting all kinds of interesting people. Comes back to the little town of Dresden and starts to work with his dad in the grocery store. But music is something you don't set aside. He kept playing every Saturday night. He played in either Glenna, Ridgetown, Rondo Park, Chatham. I don't think he did any big band music in Dresden. It wasn't big enough town for that. But he did play throughout all my growing up years. So here is some of the music that I listened to as a kid, and maybe you can help me. Sing along, clap along. I'm going to start, though, I guess I better not get into the Shadow Georg quite so soon, because we have to get him introduced to my mother yet. So he was playing at a dance in Chatham, and this piece kind of sets the tone, I think. He saw a beautiful young woman out there. Once or twice. well full, but he managed to get one dance. They had a dance. He asked her for a date. She said, sorry, I'm going to Europe next week. This is in 1936, and Mom had been helping out at the farm next door. I think there were 2 bachelors, and anyway, there was no offspring, and they left she and her siblings $250, and her sisters bought their trousseau, and others did other things, but Mom decided she was going to Europe. And she did, much to her father's despair, because a young woman at 36 did not go off by herself unchaperoned. She went, and the tales that she told us all growing up years, the memories of that were something that lived on long after her trip. When she got home, they did start to date again, and the marriage came in September 8th, 1936. A hot, humid day, married out in the little country Anglican church. Now, just a little bit about Mom's background before I go on from there. She grew up also in a family of people that loved music. They loved to get together and sing. And one of the things I remember her telling me was that they all sang in the Anglican church choir, and they all, just enjoyed being part of sing-songs. Aunt Myrtle was the organist at St. Thomas Anglican Church for 40 years, I think. And so that same love of music came from Mom's side. So back to their marriage. The day of their marriage, they had the reception on the farm. It was a hot, humid day, and my grandmother always told the story of how she had shellacked all the chairs and the carpets. And then people all sat down, had a lovely meal. They got up, the chairs. So, following their marriage, they moved to Dresden. Their mom moved back to Dresden, left Chatham, and they started raising a family. And Dad was playing in the Chatham. Okay, this is now when I'm going to share just a little bit of this nice music that he used to play. This was the theme song of the Chatham Gay Orchestra. See if you know what it is. that is written in the 30s, 40s when Dad would have played some of this music. This one is in 39, Deep Purple. I've told you the story now. So that's just a few of the nice tunes that I was privileged to hear all through my growing up years. Now, what happens to these four girls that come along from this union? And I have to look and see what did happen. I want to mention one other part of my growing up years, is the big musical memories, was the Dresden band, which marched every Sunday night to the band shell in Jackson Park. It wasn't far because Dresden, you could walk anywhere within 10 minutes. Anyway, they marched, and Dad, of course, was there playing his clarinet. And we had memories of sitting out in the park. The kids were tearing around, the parents were in cars, honking their horns as applause for each number. So some of the pieces I remembered, the old marches, I'm going to introduce my good friend Dawn to come up and join me on. We have just picked a few little marches that reminded me so much of the Dresden band. And so while Dawn's getting the music organized, I just want to tell you a little bit about the relationship that Dawn and I have had on this musical journey. We have been musical friends and friends since I was 8, so we've been friends for a long time. And I'm going to tell you a little about our time in the convent after we play these duets. But we'll start out with the duets. And what's the first one? March Military, which playing duets is such fun. And I always encourage my students who are taking solo piano to try to get together with a friend and play duets. My memory of playing duets with my sisters, Dawn and I don't have any history of playing duets until we got together in Milton, but my sisters and I certainly had lots of fun with duets, and these are some that we have played. So the first one is March Militaire by Schubert, and Dawn's got the introduction, but you have such fun. Usually you fight halfway through the duet, so you might see us scrambling around here. Dawn says her twin sisters fought on the stage. So here's March Militaire. Picture the Dresden band marching down to the band shell, or playing in the band shell. I don't think they marched in this one. When it's not always easy to give up good students. But Valma always said when we got to about the grade 6 conservatory level that she felt we could have more opportunities by going to Chatham and studying at the convent because they had a wonderful school of music at the Ursuline convent there. So at about the age of 8 or 10, Valma cut the apron strings. We didn't want to leave her, but we did, and went to the Pines in Chatham. I arrived at the Pines, and the first thing I was inspired by was this wonderful accompanist, young woman, a little older than me, not much. It was in the person of Dawn Brody. And Dawn was studying with the same teacher, Mother Germaine, that I was sent to. And I was in awe and admiration of Dawn's ability to accompany so sensitively. She had everybody in town wanting her to play for her. And she hasn't changed. She's just got better as she got older. She's not getting older, she's getting better. And so we started an association back in those days that was very special. We went to festivals together, and we saw each other at the Pines, although I was one of the younger ones, right? We nevertheless were inspired, I was inspired always by Dawn's presence there. We both studied with Mother Germaine, and then I had a singing teacher who Dawn accompanied for by the name of Mother Marguerite that terrified us. We could hear her coming. Her rosaries were always jingling because she walked very fast, and she walked with her hard heels on the floor, and we would tremble before she got her. But you know, she brought us, Mother Marguerite, or at least me in my voice training, many of the principles that I still apply today. And I'm going to say something, Dawn didn't know I was going to do this. But I thought, even though it's afternoon, it's a grand night for singing. My sisters and I spent a lot of time in our years growing up singing Rodgers and Hammerstein. And this is the Rodgers and Hammerstein from State Fair. And it always makes me feel like singing. So here it is. It's a grand night. It's a grand afternoon for singing. If you want to join me, please do. I'd love to have you with me. I see so many choir members out there. We could have a choir. It's a grand night for singing. The moon is flying high, and somewhere a bird who is bound to be heard is throwing his heart at the sky. It's a grand night for singing. The stars are bright above. journey with me. And I was reminded when Carolyn came rushing up, because she was in my first class at Milk District. And I'll tell you more about that when we get there. Thanks, Carolyn. Growing up years with 4 girls all studying piano, theory, strings, cello, violin, voice, Mom and Dad decided that they better move from the top of the grocery store, and they bought a big old rambling farmhouse in town, but at one time it had been a farmhouse. And they had 2 rooms where they put 2 old clunkers pianos, and of course we couldn't just use one piano. When we got to the stage where we were all working on our ARCT diplomas, 4 of us, it needed 2 hours a day of practicing. And so Mom, bless her soul, I couldn't do it with my kids, but she had a wake-up call, because I lived at 6:30, and we were up. 2 girls practiced from 4 to 7 till 7:30, while the other 2 girls had breakfast, got dressed. Then the next 2 started on the pianos, and the other 2 got breakfast and dressed. We lived next to the high school, so that was great. We could just listen for the bell and run over. Then after school, it was the same routine. And every day, we got our 2 hours of practicing, and then homework came after that. So she, I have to say, is the one that put the discipline behind our music so that we could actually make things happen. Dad was always there smiling, played for the relatives, he was there with his natural music ability that inspired us in that sense. So after school, on Saturdays all day we were at the Pines in Chatham, studying with the nuns. And then we all took, the 4 of us, church jobs. And I call it musical churches because I started out in the United Church, which was the biggest church in town, and I was the oldest. One day Dad got a call, I was 12 years old, and said, he was the choir director, and he said, would Judy mind coming and playing the organ? The organist was ill. And so they hired me at the age of 12, and I stayed until I was in university. My first organ wedding, where I played the organ, I was 12. Actually, I was 12 that age, and that's the organ that I played on at the Dresden United Church. And in those days, you weren't paid in money for weddings. You got a cup and saucer. So at the age of 12, I wasn't very excited about the cup and saucer. I have many of them to this day, and they're beautiful. And I think now I have more, I treasure them now. But at the time, that was not the way I hoped to be paid. Dad was the choir director, I was the organist. Now, when I went off to university, the next sister, who was at the Baptist church, moved over to the United. The sister who was at the Presbyterian moved to the Baptist. The one that was in the country moved over to the Presbyterian church. So that's what I mean about musical churches. We just sort of kept going until we all eventually left, and all 4 girls went to University of Western Ontario Faculty of Music. I think they told us there were 10 years of Wick sisters at the Faculty of Music, and my son Rob, 30 years later, finished the tradition off with the Faculty of Music. While there, I had the privilege of studying with a wonderful teacher, Howard Munn. Howard taught me a lot about lines in music. Music it's like the human voice. When you sing, there's always a rise at the top of the phrase and a downward flow. And the piano was actually a percussion instrument, so it's very difficult to get that perception across when you play the piano. I'm going to play a piece, well, I'll play a couple of pieces for you. I hope I'm not taking too much time there. That might be fun, but I don't want to keep you sick. Are you okay? Okay, well, I'm going to start with the Liebesdram, which is a piece that I played when I was in grade 8 school. And when Carol asked me to do this, it was fun to pull out some of this old music. I don't know if the chops are as good as they were then, but I'm going to play, first of all, for you, the Nocturne. And I want you to just, if you can, feel the rise and fall of that music. I hope I can produce it. Also, to notice that in music, there are silences that are just as important as the music itself. And you'll hear moments where there'll be no sound, and then the music goes on. And I think it's important to listen to the silences. So often in our daily work, or world, I should say, we do not have much silence. And in music today, unfortunately, there isn't any moment like that. But in this beautiful music, the first one I'll play by Franz Liszt has moments where the silence is just as beautiful as the music. So this is called Liebesstraum, which means dream of love. And in the days of the Romantics, Franz Liszt being the epitome of the romantic pianist, this was love. And here it is, The Dream of Love. I think it was made into a movie or a popular song. Some of you may know it. bring in the love of my life, because I met Ivan back in high school. And, and believe it or not, it was a junior farmers dance, and we were dancing to this music. And my dad was sitting, playing his clarinet, looking out, who was that handsome young farmer? She was dancing. Remember that? Anybody know that one? That September in the rain. Anyway, it's getting late, so I won't play the bridge. But that September in the rain was our first dance, and I just realized when I was putting all these memories together, Mom and Dad also danced to dance band when they met. So that was kind of nice. I found that out just by doing this talk to you today. So, okay, Ivan comes on the scene, and we're still in school, and it was pretty grim going financially. We both took out several part-time jobs. I worked in the delivery room, Judy Hunter will be glad to know. Cleaning up in the delivery room. I didn't deliver any babies. And I also taught some private students, and I worked in the school university library. And so we kept ourselves sort of the wolf away from the door by many part-time jobs. But they were great years. And when I finished university and Ivan was still in medical school, I got my first teaching job at A.B. Lucas Secondary School, taught English and music that year. And we lived at the Dearness Home, which is similar to Allendale. Ivan was on call, and we got free room and board. We didn't know what to do with all the money. And we bought our first car. So it was just like, suddenly I was out working, we had no room and board. It was just unbelievable. We paid back some debts, I'll tell you. So after that year, Ivan interned in Montreal, and I enrolled in the master's program at the University of Montreal. And our firstborn son, Glenn, came along at the end of that year. We noticed in the ad, a medical journal, that Milton needed a doctor. So we said, yeah, that's pretty good. It's not too far from Dresden. It's close to Chatham, or close to Toronto. It has a hospital. That was something that was on our list. So Ivan says, we'll just go for a couple of years, because he wanted to go back specialist. So when I drove into the town, all I could see were railroad tracks and gas stations. And after living in Montreal, I thought, oh, this is the pits. I think I can endure this for 2 years, knowing that Ivan's going to move on. And to make matters worse, there was no place to rent. We couldn't afford to buy a house. No place to rent in 1966, Jim. Do you remember that? Anyway, we decided that what we'd have to do is pitch a tent. But Dr. Stevenson, who was living in the old Stevenson, our first hospital in Milton, had an apartment there in that old hospital, said, I'm going to be at my cottage all summer. You can rent from me and stay in that. So we stayed in Dr. Stevenson's apartment the first summer. And Ivan took his office to what was the old fire hall. It had a great big plate glass window. And I was the secretary with the baby in the basket sat at the desk. And we looked out, hoping someone would come in. And I said, like, let's look busy. I said to Ivan, look as if we're doing something. So one day a man came across from the hotel and wanted to use the washroom. That was a good start. So, yeah, those years were great years at Milton, and we did stay longer, as you can see. I think it's about 46 years now. I felt a little isolated from my colleagues musically, and so I called up a bunch of gals that were teaching in town and said, let's form a Milton Music Teachers Association so our students can get out there and perform for one another, and we can talk and share problems. So I'm really very grateful for that group, because they're still going and they've got their festival going. So at the same time, I was a member of the University Women's Club here, and they said to me, would you come and do a music appreciation group? Oh, we did that, and Anne was in there. She played a recorder. We did everything, but I thought, this is crazy. These women have man-made voices. not man-made, God-made voices. And let's use the voice instead of the instrument here. And so 8 of us, first of all, just started to sing. And those first 8, of which Dawn Brody was one. And I forgot to tell the little story, where Dawn came up to talk to the nuns, and they said they think Judy Wicks has moved to Milton. Or was it Malton? Anyway, Dawn discovered I was there, and she came up the old hospital steps with little Caroline, who was 3 years old at the time. And up they came, and it's been just wonderful to have Dawn enter my life again here in Milton, because she's been with me every step of the way, of the musical way, and more. So we started this little choir, Dawn being one, and we met at our home at 200 Queen Street. There were 8 of us. And here's the song, and how many of you are out here now who've sung in the Milton chansonettes? We'll start with chansonettes. I see Eleanor. Yeah, great. Well, I'm going to play Yellowbird Girls, so I want to hear you sing. This is great, our song. Wait a minute, I'm saying more. Is that too high? Too high. Yeah. Now, we did several trips with the choirs, and one of the most notable was our trip to Dresden. When I came and announced to the choir that we are going on tour, the choir said, "Where?" I said, "To Dresden." Well, the gales of laughter went through the choir room that night. So I said, "Dad, you get up and tell them about all the great things that Dresden has to offer." So Dad got up, and those you know Dad, well, he said, "We just put sewers in." We went to Dresden, and it's funny how special experiences stand out. But while touring Uncle Tom's Cabin there, we walked into what was the original black church. And there were people visiting there, just sitting, contemplating. And we started singing Just a Closer Walk. And as the choir wandered in, it just built and built. Do you remember that one, Dawn? And there wasn't a dry eye there, but it was just one of those special moments that you have in music. And it just still stays with me, our visit to Dresden. Other areas of music, I'm not going to take too much longer here because I'm realizing I'm running out of space time-wise and you're getting tired of sitting. Why don't you stand for a minute? You guys have been sitting for about an hour and a half. Do you want to do that? Just take a stretch. up there, and still looking as young as they did when they were back in Milk District. But I had called Lori Walker in the summer, and he said, "Can you just fill in for one class of instrumental music?" So I said yes, but with great trepidation. I spent the whole summer reviewing fingerings of all the instruments and so on, and I started my first class, in which Carol Brody was in. One of my favorite classes. I still look on them as one of my favorites. And you know, you start these kids, they don't know a note, they can't play a note on their instrument, and suddenly you hear them playing 2 or 3 notes, and we make up something. And before you know it, it's sounding like something. Trombone Boogie was one of our best pieces. We played it every music night. Remember that? So those are great memories of Milton District and the Milton District Singers, of which Lisa was one. We had a lot of fun with them. They came in with the choristers and really enjoyed that. While that was going on, my own kids are growing up, and we formed the Victoria Street Band, which was a neighborhood band that came every Saturday night, and we really had a good time with them. And Mom and Dad, this is the nice part about my life, is that my parents moved to Milton, and they were part of my musical life for the last 30 years of their lives. Sang in the choristers, sang in the church choir, played in the church orchestra.
They played at Milton District.
They played with Mom and Maureen Lewis came to my door. "Can we join your grade 9 instrumental class?" And they stayed in the class maybe 3 years. Then I said, "It's time for you to go into grade 10. That's, I think, one of the greatest lessons I learned from my mother. She was always learning. And I think as a teacher, if we can't always be learning, then our teaching goes stale. And it's very important that we do that. Mom, again, taught me that. She and Maureen played in the church orchestra as well, and Dad as well, looking over his sax. Couldn't hear what I was telling him, but he played along. In 1980, interim minister Wayne Irwin said, "Could I come to St. Paul's and just for a year," he said, "because we're needing to have a fill-in right now." So I said, "Okay." And 29 years later, I was still at St. Paul's. And so I really want to say that those years have been so special for me. And I'm still here enjoying the beautiful music that St. Paul's Choir brings every week. But for me, those years at St. Paul's as music minister will always be part of me. I think back of the cantatas and of the first CD that we produced, and the carols by candlelight, the Easter Journey, the requiems, and Hallelujah chorus when everybody came up from the congregation, and the trumpets and organ, and just many friendships and wonderful things that came along with that. So I'd like to sing this song about love, because that's what St. Paul's is for me. And it was a piece written by David Ochterlony. It's called, what is it called? Not the gift of love. I see the love of God in every river. Yeah, we better not get the copywriters in here, we're in trouble. I see the love of God in every river, flowing wide, flowing free. I see the love of God in every ocean, reaching further than I can see. I see the love of God in every valley, offering shelter to you and me. I see the love of God in every mountain, standing fast through eternity. The love of God is all around me, where'er the trouble, pain, or care. play for you, but I'll do that another time because I know we're running a little late, so thank you for your patience. I just want to say that many gifts have been shared with me and are part of the fabric that still continues to enrich the ministry at St. Paul's. As I sit in the congregation, I continue to be touched and inspired by the music. Thank you, choir, that's offered every week. May the Spirit conveyed in the music through the gifts that are offered continue to bring us closer to God and wash away from the soul the dust of everyday life. Thank you to St. Paul's for the privilege of sharing my musical journey with you at UCW. I'm thankful for the many people in my life who encouraged and inspired me in my musical development, for those who shared their gifts with me along the way, for those of you who sat in the audience and encouraged us, allowed us to communicate our music to you, or sat in my living room, or just shared it in a special way. May music bring joy to your life. And now I'm going to finish without a song, because I think without a song, life would be not what it is today. Without a song.